My name is Karen Carson, and I am interviewing Wendy Yandle-Smith for Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. The date is March 26, 2017, and the interview is taking place in Talking Rock, Georgia. So, there's some initial questions. What year were you born?
1954.
And where were you born?
In Lynbrook, New York.
Okay.
Lynbrook.
Oh, okay. I don't have to write this down. I keep thinking I'm writing things down. Yeah, okay. And can you sort of describe your family's political leanings or sort of what your environment was growing up in that way?
Well, my father had been in the British Navy, so he was at that point obviously a British citizen.
Yeah.
And he met my mom. She was one of those hostesses for the troops in Poughkeepsie, New York, where she lived. And they ended up getting married in 1944. My mother grew up in a Quaker family, so she was always, maybe not personally so peaceful, but her background was, a very quiet, peaceful, get along with people kind of thing. My dad, and she usually voted Republican. At that point, I remember going to a Nixon rally and actually seeing him close enough to see him, and I was pretty young, and I thought that was very exciting. And my dad became an American citizen and was a Democrat. He passed away when I was 8, shortly before Kennedy was shot, and I know he would have been very upset with that because that was his hero. When I left home and started voting, I didn't really register as either a Democrat or a Republican. I voted for who I liked, which I will say most of the time was a Democrat, but not 100%, certainly not in some of the local things. Sometimes there was a local Republican that I liked. And I lived in the New York area in the Mid-Hudson Valley, which is actually the part of it I was in anyway, was largely Republican for 50 years. I remarried my husband, who's also having an interview, in 2007, and he was a federal employee for NSA, so he couldn't protest anything at that time. And we lived there until he retired. He retired in 2012, and we moved to this area because I'm a nurse, and I can take care of his mom, who was very ill and actually ended up passing away a year and a half ago, Christmas. But then we moved to Talking Rock, although the drive, you would never know we're still in teeny Talking Rock because it took us 45 minutes to get here, even though we're in the same tiny little hamlet. So I don't know if I'm actually truly in it or not, but that's my mailing address. I live in a community like this.
Oh, okay.
And my children remained behind, 2 of them in New York, where we lived for the longest time. And then one of my daughters had lived with us. She moved after college. She came and stayed with us in Maryland, met her husband there, who is from El Salvador. But his entire family are fortunately citizens. And I was aware of the march, and I decided that I would visit her at that time, which would be a convenient time. And so she's the pictures that I'm going to give to Lorna. They are, she's in them too because she also marched, and her husband stayed home with the little boys.
Oh, goodness. Well, have you have you participated in political activities before the march, or what kinds of?
No, honestly, although I've always voted, I have not been particularly political. I'm not one to really, I'm not. I don't understand. I do understand now better than I did, but I'm not real great on can this be done, can that be done, how long does something take to go through, committees and everything. Those are the kind of things I didn't even really understand until I sort of felt forced to make myself understand them.
Well, it sounded like your mom did have other family members that have been participated in any sort of movements or political activities, and you said you'd seen Nixon, so it sounded like
my mom was really big on the Republican Party, and not that there weren't any good Republicans around that time, and he didn't turn out to be one of them.
Right.
She did take us there. I know I was in New York during the Civil Rights Movement. I was a little too young to actually participate to leave and go and participate, but I know that I lived in an area that now is largely a black community. At that time, I had one, maybe there were other children in the school that I didn't meet, but there was only one African American child in my class.
Oh, wow.
And we had a bathroom buddy system, and I was new. We had just moved to a different district, and so I didn't know anyone. You couldn't go to the bathroom unless you had a buddy, and you had to find someone who wanted to be your buddy, and it appeared no one wanted to be her buddy, and I didn't know anyone to be my buddy, so we became bathroom buddies. I said, hey, you want to be bathroom buddies? Because I need to go to the bathroom. And I remember clearly my mother's, I wanted to have her come over and play.
Yeah.
And my mother said, honey, it would not be safe for you or for her. If you went to her house, it would be just as unsafe for you. She said, I've told you over and over, the color of your skin means nothing about who you are, but to the people around you, it does. And I was saying, you're a hypocrite, that you won't, but I can now see just from the general atmosphere, even in a very largely conservative area, that although I have not had much of any real problem, I could see how that she was right. Even up north, it would have been a problem if I had gone into the part of my community that was filled with people who were not the same color as me, and she would have had probably an even worse problem coming into my community. But we stayed friends anyway. At least we could go to the bathroom and play together at gym.
I was surprised even at that part, because I know my mom was in high school, and it was the first year they integrated the schools, and there was one girl in her class who sat next to my mom, and my mom loaned her a pencil, and the teacher told my mom, who ended up being also my history teacher, my brother's history teacher in high school, Mr. Grant told Mama, he's like, now Janet, you need to be careful who you're friends with. And who you're
it was on my report card
that she was in the bathroom,
that I could make better choices.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember my mother going up to the school and saying, you need to make better choices, sir, about what you put on my daughter's report card.
Wow. Well, so you stayed in that same community, your children, did they experience any of the same kinds of things?
We didn't live in Long Island any longer.
Oh, okay.
We moved to the mid-Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
My children really did not have normally a problem. My middle daughter is the one I said she has curls because she was born with horns and God covered them up so I wouldn't recognize it immediately. She's the kind who would say to me, you go to your room, bad mommy. And she's the one who marched with us, by the way.
Aww.
And she had a friend who was being picked on by I think he was picking on her just because basically he was a bully. He picked on anybody that could be picked on. And he had said something nasty to her. And instead of using her words, which she had a lot of them, and you would think that you could have done it, she was 6, and I got a call from the principal saying that Emily had punched Zach in the nose when I had to come to the school. And I was like, uh-oh, because my kid was a little skinny, wiry thing, tiny, and Zach was a big boy, big boy, which is probably, and she had punched him because he had called her a name, and it was just, I said, well, what, where is he?
Yeah.
Where's the boy? So the principal did have him come in, and I said, I've told Emily to use her words, not her hands. And he's crying because he got punched. And I said, and she shouldn't have hit you, but calling this child a name is something that should have never happened either Mr. So what about you shake hands, agree to behave like decent human beings?
Yeah.
And years later, I mean, he was with the group that used to hang out at the gas station, and the kids would sort of give the older people a tough time. He was like, "You leave her alone. That's Mrs. Yandle. Don't bother her. She's my friend." So,
wow.
but that was really mostly it. There were a mixture of children in that area. It was certainly much more Caucasian than anything else.
Yeah.
But there were some. It wasn't like one child like it had been when I was growing up.
Well, do you feel all of that led to you? What ultimately led to your main reasons for wanting to participate in the march this time? You said you've not done anything until now. Until you felt
everything, pretty much everything Donald Trump stands for is pretty much everything I resist. And when he was just in the running for it, I was talking badly about him already, saying, keep an eye, because two of my children are married, and one is married, like I said, to the family from El Salvador, and so they are, and in fact, the dad, her father-in-law, is a construction person, and he and the group that he is part of work at the White House. I mean, they do a lot of that kind of work. So they weren't a problem. The other side of the family, I've said to the other one's father-in-law, hey, listen, I don't on Facebook, I don't unfriend family, but I unfollow family. And if you don't like what I'm saying, I offer to you the unfriend feature here, because if you don't like it, it's not going to stop. Because he kept saying things about, we have to give him a chance, everybody's complaining, and he hasn't even been inaugurated yet, and all these things. And I'm like, he doesn't need a chance. He's not competent. That's the first thing right there. He's not qualified. He's completely incompetent in doing this kind of thing. He wasn't even that great a businessman. And I'm not going to be quiet. I like Facebook because it's a good chance to get out there. I've started to learn to tweet. I tweet Trump every single day.
Oh, wow.
Well, how are you today? I still don't like you at all. You need to leave. We want to see your taxes, or something along those lines. The other day I wrote, loser, sad. We want to see your taxes. But just everything about him, really, his horrible attitude about everyone else. I have worked in mental health also, and I recognize very quickly that he is not stable, and that worries me. The people he surrounded himself with now, oh my goodness, horrible. So, and I've always been sort of even if I wasn't initially a liberal, I was always a bleeding heart, and I can't stand to see, families torn apart. I'm aware of someone who works with my family in Maryland who is terrified. She isn't even from Mexico. I said, well, you might have that in your favor, but the problem is they don't even really care. When it was time for her visa to be renewed, she was afraid to go. Yeah. And I don't blame her. And she says, I avoid places where other Latino people gather. And I said, I gave her all the ACLU information. I went to that, like the training that they had in Dahlonega, and got terribly lost. I walked like 4 miles to get 0.25 miles back to my car. But,
wow. Well, how did you end up finding groups here that, and ultimately you went to the DC March, right?
I went to the DC March.
Okay. So describe your process of finding people who were going, or how you found out about the march.
Well, I found out about the
there.
Pantsuit Nation. I had been invited to that we have a lot of friends in Maryland still, and almost 100% of them are liberal. And I had an invite to Pantsuit Nation, and then I invited all the like-minded people I knew, and that was where I heard about the march. And then I said, well, we can do that because we can visit Emily and, stay there and then go in, because it would have been a nightmare, I'm sure, to try to find some place to march. And I got a the night before the march. We had the app downloaded and everything. I had the ACLU number on my arm. My husband was carrying the mailbox just because we were following. I did not bring a purse because it said don't bring a purse. Then I see people have babies strapped to them. I'm like, I could have brought a purse. But I was listening to everything, and one of our local friends contacted us and said her daughter, who actually may be interviewed at some point, was there, and she said alone. I think she felt like she was alone because it was a new area to her and everything, but actually she was with her husband and a friend. And I didn't find that out until I ran into her, and I said to her, hi, I'm your mom's friend, Wendy. And she said she probably neglected to tell you I was with my husband, right? But it was so hard. I did manage to contact her a few times for her mom, and she said to me, the friend contacted me, and when it was all over and we were heading home on the metro, we were heading home with two policemen who had been at the march. They were exhausted and they couldn't wait to go home. And she had said to me, Fox News here it's not like you've been telling me all day, that everyone is extremely helpful and very pleasant and no problems at all. No trouble with any of the police. The police were friendly to us. We were friendly to the police. Everyone cooperated. And she said, that's not the spin that's being put on it here. So I said, hold on just a minute. And I said, excuse me, officer, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're tired and went home, but I just have a question. I want to know if maybe I missed something. There were so many people. There were like 4 different marches going on. We ended up being in different groups of people going because it was intersected. It was crazy. And I said, did I miss something? Was there a problem? Because I have a friend down in Georgia who is concerned about, what's being said. And he said, this is the most, I've worked, he's 30-something, I think it was 37 years, and this is the best of any type of gathering, any type of march that I've ever seen. There was nothing, absolutely nothing. So he said even the metro, because the other guy was a metro officer. And coming, you were like this, you couldn't even breathe. And my daughter was having a little trouble with claustrophobia. And people were saying, would you be better sitting down? Are you okay? Take deep breath. Everyone was so nice. And he said, considering this is the most amount of people we've ever passed through like this, and there's been no problems. Nobody is bothering anyone else. So,
how would you describe sort of your mood going in and coming out? Was there a shift in how you felt during the day, or were there certain moments of specific, emotional?
Well, I was very nervous going in because we had all our equipment. And I was a little worried. I know my sister-in-law, who feels the same way about things, but she was concerned. She said, I hope you're willing to be arrested because you might be. And I said, well, I'm not going to commit any crime. If I'm told to do something, I'm going to do it. And I'm certainly not going to loot anything. I'm not going to do anything illegal. But if I am just swept up in something, I said, you know what, I'm retired. I don't have a career that I have to worry about having an arrest on my record. Neither, fortunately, my husband doesn't have to worry about that anymore. I said, so honestly, I've got the phone number on my arm. We've got emergency numbers to know that we're okay, but this is what's happened. And I said, if it happens, it happens. But as I continued, even just the walk to where we were going in from the metro, you could see people were already smiling at each other and talking to each other. And on the train, I met a woman from Pennsylvania, and we knew groups that were coming from New York that would be there. And actually, we lost my daughter when she went to try to find one of them because she gave an exact street intersection where she was, but you couldn't get through to it. And then I couldn't get through to her. And a teacher who was there with 47 medical school students, all in yellow jackets, I couldn't get through. But it said to my husband, well, let's back up so these kids can stay together. And she heard me. And she said, are you trying to go that way? And I said, yes, I'm trying to find my daughter. She said, come on, Mama, hang on to Jared. And she gave me his hood, and on we went. She said, just chant with us. And
I love it.
So it was, finally we did find her, although we had to go back through that crowd the other way. But, even on a grocery store line, people get grumpy most of the time. And this was nose to jacket. I'm short. I was worried about the babies who were connected to parents who were in strollers because I'm like, they have to breathe, but everybody was looking out for the little ones.
Yeah.
I've been to New York at the tree lighting,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody looks out for anybody there. And I was saying, I was so worried about the babies. I was like, there's babies in strollers here. It's like they fell on them. And there, everybody was like making a little area around the babies. Everybody was looking out for everybody else. And I eventually made it back to her, and we were like, oh, thank God.
Well, I also felt all the babies were laughing. I didn't see a single baby crying
No,
or upset.
it was
Just,
crying.
I'm like, none of them were unhappy. This one baby
Or sleeping.
took my finger and was sucking on my finger. I did not know this person from Adam. And the mom's like, he does that to everybody. And I'm like, okay, it's a highly unusual, sweet environment right now. So,
Wow.
But very cool. So obviously after you got there, how would you describe, I mean, you've said a few times it was very safe. What other kinds of words would you use to sort of describe the mood and the atmosphere?
Well, we couldn't get to the actual mall area. During the programming, we couldn't hear what the people were saying, but every once in a while we would hear the roar of the crowd, and
right.
even back getting off of the metro. I can say subway because of New York.
Yeah.
But getting off of the metro and walking down the street, we weren't even there yet, and we could hear people, roar the crowd, and then everybody on the street, even though they don't know what was said either, they figured it had to be good.
Right.
And you would hear the roar of the crowd again.
What time did you get there in the morning?
Well, we left at our house at 9. We knew that was late, but we thought, silly, we thought maybe would avoid some of the crowds, and also her children are very young, and the baby needed to breastfeed first and things like that. So we didn't want to rush it, and we were leaving Dad with the 2 kids we knew all day. And although he's great, there's a limit. So we left about 9. I think we got down there about 10:30, and then we walked again to probably 11 before we got actually in the general area of the mall. And we were in a side street march from the beginning. Most of the pictures that I've given are from that. We went by where we were on the parade route for the inauguration march, and I've seen pictures of the benches that have people sparsely sitting in them for that. And I took some pictures just to show that there were people sitting in every possible seat and standing on the sides and up on the steps of the building behind, and there were little platforms with people standing and singing or talking with their signs. So we were in that first before we ever got to the main area where the main march was supposed to be, and then the announcement was passed from person to person that they weren't going to be able to do the one big march, that it was going to have to be, we're just going to all head down pretty much the road you're on.
Right, however you can.
But it worked out. I mean, even with that, they were intersecting, and there was it's just everybody sort of merged around each other nicely, and the police were there at one point. There was a man who was yelling, get off. But I noticed he was standing up on something and sort of out of the way, because he could have been trampled if we had wanted to be unpleasant, which we didn't. But he was saying, get off the streets, get off the streets. Didn't you see what happened yesterday? And nobody was trying to bother with him. We just sort of let him go and do his talking. And one lady seemed a little nervous, and she was closest to mine. She goes, I hope he doesn't do anything. And she was black, which I noticed they were not, and older, which both of those things doesn't make it that easy. Yeah. And I said, well, if it makes you nervous, come on between us, come on over here. And so she walked between us for a while, and my husband and I were on the side because you couldn't really walk, is maybe not the right word. Shuffling along. So we were stuck sort of near him, but he wasn't doing anything other than being rude and loud.
Was he the only one? Did you see others?
He's the only person I saw. I heard that there were some people up by the Lincoln Monument, but I didn't make it up there, and I saw no one else, and I could hardly even see him because there was such a crowd around. But I could tell that I could certainly hear him, and I could see like the top of his head. Mm-hmm. And he was an older white guy too.
And it's a brave soul to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's it's too positive of a word, probably. But did your path lead you by the White House? Did you end up going by the White House?
I did not go, but I went by Trump Tower.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, we took a little rest on whatever that building is with steps
Mm-hmm.
across from Trump Tower. We took some pictures of my husband holding his sign. And it's funny because he has a real problem with anxiety in large groups.
Yeah.
And I was worried about him going just for that.
Mm-hmm.
And he had no problem. It was really funny.
Oh,
He was great. He was enthusiastic, and he had a sign that said "Women deserve better." And a lot of women were saying, "We appreciate you. We were having that sign. We appreciate you."
What were some of the other signs you saw that you remember that you really liked, or were there ones?
Well, I took a couple of pictures
Mm-hmm.
of gentlemen. I only took pictures of people who I said, "Is it all right with you if I take your picture and it goes on the internet?" And they said yes. One man, he was Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
and he had something indicating that on his shirt, and he said, "I will give your president the same respect he gave mine."
Mm-hmm.
And he was enthusiastic about having his picture online.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, "Okay, here I am." And the other man was one of the first men I saw wearing a pussy hat.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cute, and I took his picture. There's one that said, "I wish my uterus shot bullets. That way you wouldn't want to regulate it," or something like that.
Wow.
That was cute. There were some children, little like 6-7-year-old children who were just doing cheers. They were saying, "He hi ho ho, Mr. Trump has got to go," or something like that, and that was really cute. We videotaped them for a minute.
Oh, yeah, so you can give those also.
Yeah, if she can take videotapes.
Yeah, she's doing the video from the, I think from the phone, or if it's on the phone, but you can.
It is on the phone.
Yeah, so she'll be able to do that. She's going to do something that
There's
I
a guy
recorded
shaped like
also.
a T-Rex. I'm not sure why his sign said because I couldn't, but I took a picture because my grandsons all love dinosaurs. So I took a picture of the T-Rex in the crowd.
Were there other chants that you remember that you really liked, or anything that in particular that you chanted that you remember?
I sort of went with whatever they said, except if I don't know if they were silly. Some of them were a little silly about your grab. I didn't chant the things about grabbing pussies or things like that. But because that's the big point that all these people seem to be making about how, the signs were so rude. And most of the signs were not rude. Mine was a quote from, oh goodness, what's his name? The African leader, Mandela.
Oh, yeah.
About if injustice for one is injustice for all. And
did you have other signs besides the two that you and your husband had? Did your daughter have
my
a sign?
daughter had one that said, "No human is illegal." And justice for all on the other side. So that says something on both sides. And it was funny because my grandson is 3, had just turned 3, and he was making posters too.
Oh, fun.
And say, we didn't actually carry them because no one would have ever been able to read them, but he was drawing dinosaurs and cats.
Yeah.
Oh, gato! So,
were there any that surprised you, or were there any signs you saw or issues that you saw people drawing attention to that you were surprised by, or that?
I was more surprised by when we were going by Trump Tower that this lady who was next to me started yelling very loudly.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what it means either. She started yelling really loudly, and her voice I could hear. And I'm a nurse, I can't help it. I said, I said, "That's you're not gonna have a voice after this." And she said, "I know. I just hate him so much." She was going,
well, that was people were screaming through the megaphones, and their voices were already gone, screaming through the megaphones, and you could hear it. They were just already. They had been doing it all day long. How long did you stay? I mean, at what point did you guys leave? Or
we stayed till quite late because my daughter had worked at Cuba Libre, which is a restaurant down there.
I know.
And so we called them, and they didn't really have reservations being taken, but she knew the guy who owns it because she'd worked there, and they gave us a reservation. So we went and hung out at the library, actually, at the DC Library, DC Public Library. And a lot of marchers were coming in to use the restrooms to go out. It was like downstairs to your left. You automatically knew where we were there, and we just sort of rested there because my knees were killing me. I've been on them all day long, and so we rested there, and then we went over, had dinner. And there was actually another little side group of people that I saw while we were eating. It was well after the time, but there was also a small group, and they still had their signs, and they were going down. But.
Wow. Well, what were some of the? I know I had a friend or a couple of friends who actually stayed later that night, and they had pictures of the stacks of posters people had left, or did you see a lot of that, or what kinds of things?
I didn't. I saw a lot of little patches as we were walking to the metro. We did see some patches of signs, and I know they left a lot of their signs by Trump Tower.
Yeah.
Not that would necessarily do any good, but I know. So sad, losers.
Well, did you? What kind of feeling do you think? Has there been a momentum kept up afterwards? I mean, what's your feeling about the influence of the march, or what an impact it's had?
Well, we went out the next day, and we're excited to see people who still had their pussy hats going out for lunch, or they had something on them that indicated they'd been to the march, either a button or something, or they were wearing a shirt. Coming back here, I decided to actually troll the people who wrote letters to the editor. There was a woman who had written a very thoughtful letter to the editor, who I said, that's an unusual name. I bet I could find her if she's on Facebook. And sure enough, I found somebody who sounded, from what I could read of her Facebook page, like it was probably her. So I sent her a message, and I said, would you by any chance be the woman who wrote the letter to the editor in the Pickens County Progress? And she said, yes, I am. And she said, unfortunately, we've just moved to Tennessee to be near my grandson, but she gave me the name of David Robinson, the chair for the Democratic Party. And then not that much later, I saw Marie's, and I did the same thing with Marie, and she was able to get me involved with a bunch of other people who are interested. We go to Carrington's for coffee one night a week. I keep meeting more and more people. I was so happy when I came in here that I didn't know anybody. It was best. I'm glad I don't know any of you, because that means it's more people, and I've been going to a lot of different meetings. Like I said, I went to the ACLU also. I think down here it's especially important to keep up the momentum, even though a lot of the things they recommended at the ACLU meeting about the Freedom Cities and talking to the police officers about, their officers and who they pull over. In this community, I don't think that is even something worth trying. First of all, we don't have that diverse a population right in this general area. And when they do pull over someone, they're going to say, and they're probably telling the truth, that they pulled them over because they've done something they shouldn't do. That very well may be the case. And if they usually don't turn out to be people of color or Latino, because we don't have that many people. But even in Delaware, though, I was hearing that one of the workers at a local Mexican restaurant had been picked up at work, and he'd been here like 20-something years and working. So it does happen, and we do have Mexican restaurants with Latino people working in them. So I guess it's not impossible. I know that when I ride in D.C. with my son-in-law and my daughter, that there have been 2 times that people have. One time it was a police officer who pulled us over for no apparent reason whatsoever. And my son-in-law had been driving, and he came and Brian rolled down his window, and I just sat in the back seat, and I said, "Hello, officer," and I said, "What, is there a problem?" And he's like, "Oh, I think I pulled over the wrong vehicle." And then somebody didn't like that my daughter wasn't turning in the light well enough, and he was on this side, so who he saw, she was driving, this man saw was my son-in-law. And he was saying, pull over to the side, I want to see you touched my car, which, I mean, if the bumper touched, it really touched because we didn't even feel anything. And so I rolled down my window and I said, well, he was really yelling. So I rolled down my window and I said, well, we will pull over, sir, if you want us to, but we can't at this moment, so stop honking and yelling. And he's going, oh, ma'am. He goes, oh, ma'am. And sat back like that, like, oh my goodness. Well, okay, we'll pull over. And then he looks like, he like sticks his head out the window. The car's okay. We'll go. So there definitely is people, not just police officers, but people in general will often give a hard time to someone who they see. Plus he's got wild curly hair, sort of, which he's a teacher. When he teaches, he puts it back and makes it look neat. But on the weekends, he lets it all hang loose. And so he just looks like somebody that people want to bother. He gets more speeding tickets than anybody else, and he doesn't really speed more than anybody else. Right. But it's just easy to, Yeah.
Well, when you came back here after the march, was it difficult to share your experience, or did you find it hard for people in your immediate, like your neighbors or people that you typically
my neighbors do not know anything about me.
So you don't talk, you can't.
Well, I live sort of isolated anyway, but I know that the people around me are not like-minded for the most part. I have located one person who I know takes care of the highway near us, and so I know she's at least environmentally, and some of the signs she has on her house give me the impression that, so I actually pulled up next to her the other day, and I said, hey, I'm your neighbor, I live on the street, and I just realized how close she actually lives to me, because the community is very large, and it's larger than this one, but still this is pretty daunting. And I said, I see that someone I know, because someone from one of the groups I'm in is a friend of yours on Facebook, and I told her the name. I said, and I wondered if, I think we're pretty like-minded on a number of things. Would you, I'm going to send you a friend request. Would that be all right? And she seemed very excited and happy about it. And actually, I invited her to the coffee thing when I invited people, and she said, oh, no, I can't come this week, but next week. So I've had a few people who were in a group with my husband that was not a political group at all, who got fed up with things we both post and have decided not to be our friends. But there is another person who I know thinks the way I do, and I've invited her to all the things, and she's joined. So I wouldn't put a Hillary sticker, for example, on my car. I had when we moved here, I had an Obama sticker on my car because it was around the time of the second term, and I had one on my car. I had moved from Maryland, where it was never a problem, and I was asked to take care of a 100-year-old lady who lived on the other side of the mountain, but she was in our community. And she met me, and she loved me, and everything seemed fine. And her son, who was in his 70s already, said to me, everything seems great except for that sticker you have on your car. We're going to have to change your mind on that. And I said, well, then it's no deal. I can't work for you if I have to change my mind because it's not happening. He said, well, you're going to push that on my mom? I said, no, I'm not. That's not what I do. But he had her sitting in front of Fox News all day, every day, and she'd say, oh, that's so terrible. And I'd say, ma'am, that's not news. The news is so terrible. I said, that's because it's not news. It's an opinion show. See how they're all sitting around and talking? They're just giving their opinions. And not all their opinions are this. And we ended up being a great friend. We loved it. She fell one time, and I couldn't get her up by myself, and she wasn't hurt. I just couldn't get her up by myself, and we were waiting for someone to come help us. So I patted her with pillows and blankets, and it happened to be my birthday. So I said, remember, it's my birthday, we're going to have a slumber party. And we sat and we watched TV that wasn't Fox News, because I was in charge of the clicker. And she forgot she was on the floor. She said, this bed feels a little funny, but this is fun. I'm like, well, that's because we're on the floor. And I did have somebody at the gas station, a younger man, say, you're lucky you're a woman.
Whoa.
And I said, and you're lucky I took my medicine. And that was it. It was a little exchange, but that was it. No one had, and I'd had a couple of people say, I wouldn't dare do that myself, but
good for you.
I'm with you. So, but this time it was so more contentious. People were so mean. I haven't seen the meanness myself personally here, but we bless each other's hearts instead, and I figured that out. But we do. But it's still, I've seen and heard about the way people are treating each other, and the only trouble I ever saw was in the Baltimore airport. So it wasn't really trouble. It was just that there was a man who was, before you got into the security, he was talking to people going up and saying, coming through the line, and he was very friendly. I could see him when I was going this way, and I could hear him talking to people friendly. He was a nice man. And when he came to the family in front of me, who was clearly Muslim, it was a woman who could have been the mom if she was a young mom, or maybe an older sister or aunt of 2 teenage boys, and she had on the traditional. And he said to her, did you pack your own suitcase? And she said yes. And I can see why you would ask that, because that way you have to admit if something's in there. And he said, has anyone had access to your suitcase since you left the home at any point up until now? And she said, no, I did it myself. And he turned to the family behind me that was black and said, did you pack it? And I said, excuse me? I said, aren't you going to ask me? And he said, kind of like, okay. Did you pack your own suitcase? Why, yes, I did, sir. Has anyone been into it? No, they haven't. Okay, and then I saw him give a little to the guy at the machine, and sure enough, when we got up there, of course, they made the woman get want the extra, and they did it to me too. I got the extra pat down, so I'm like, and the boys they had not flown before, and they were like, excuse me, can you tell me, do I have to take off my shoes? Do I have to take off my watch? And I'm like, you definitely have to take off your shoes. I haven't been taking my watch off, but you know what? I would take my watch off and put it in one of the special things with your phone, because there was someone they felt like they could talk to. And it's just ridiculous. Nothing bad happened to them, but it's wrong.
Right.
It is wrong to skip over the old white woman, because I'll tell you, the old white woman is getting more dangerous every day. I'll bite you right on the kneecap, which is what I can reach.
I love that. Well, I want to ask, before I forget, did you actually wear one of the pussy hats? And how did you feel about the whole...
I didn't have a pussy hat, and neither did my daughter. But my husband was sad that he hadn't bought one. He really wants one. So one of Sue Justice in our group has been making them, and she said she'll make him one.
Oh, great.
He says, I really want a pussy hat. I can't believe I didn't get one when I could have. But it was all cash, and I think that was the problem. We were trying not to carry a lot of money or a lot of money. We didn't know what was going to happen, so...
Right. Well, how did you feel about that whole... everyone wearing the pussy? I mean, how did that...
Well, I liked that it identified people. The reason I was marching was not so much because I, as a woman, feel that I am particularly downtrodden. I mean, when I was younger, I was raped, and I didn't even tell anybody, because I knew that I had put myself in a situation. It doesn't make it right, but I know what the law will say. Well, you're pretty stupid to let someone show. We were on a camping trip, a group of us from nursing school on a camping trip, and whatever reason, no one had an accurate timepiece at this point. We had a bus that we had to catch. And he said, well, I don't have a watch. This guy was camping nearby, and he said, well, I don't have a watch either. But in my van, if I turn it on, I have to, if you want to walk with me, I try to get one of my friends to go with me, and none of them would go. So I said, I go, and he stopped to try to kiss me when we were along the way. This was very mountainy. And I said, no, I have a boyfriend. And he said, well, I could throw you off this mountain, And he sort of said it like that. He said no one would ever know, and I could say it was an accident. So I was like, okay, because, I'm not stupid. And I know you could push me off this mountain, and you're right. You could say I fell. And when we got back to his van, he said, get in the back. And I didn't even, he knew that wasn't my plan, but at that point, what was I going to profit from fighting him? So, and I didn't even bother. In fact, some people pulled up looking for directions when we're back there, and he got out and talked to them, but they sounded like young people I couldn't see.
Yeah.
And I said, I might get myself in more trouble, actually. I have no way of knowing, and if I try to say something to these people and they are not helpful, I'm in huge trouble, and I have to get back to the campsite. And he ended up taking me back to the campsite, and then he said, well, maybe I'll come by later and see you guys. And I was so afraid he was going to come by later. I sat up all night with my friend. I was like, oh no, I am not. He didn't come back, but but that pretty much is the only thing. I've had some older adults who've tried to be fresh, and I just said, I will tell your wife, or I will tell I wasn't afraid in that situation, but we do get put in situations and know that if we go to the law, they're going to say, well, why on earth did you walk with this person in a mountain trail? You don't know him. And they have a point. But other than that, I'm white, I'm Christian, I'm straight. I'm really was marching more for the people who were afraid to march. Mm-hmm. I have some friends who said, I'm scared, and they have more reason to be scared, either because of the color of their skin or their religion. I have I think it's the benefit of having lived in New York, of having lived right by D.C., mm-hmm. where I know Muslims. I know people of pretty much any religion or any shade of color that you could possibly come up with. And so I know that you don't need to be afraid of an entire group of people because of what somebody in the group does. So I was more marching for them than for me, because I'm like, and who am I marching with? My white Christian straight male husband who actually worked for the federal government. So he was marching for everybody that wasn't him.
Yeah.
So.
Do you feel like that experience, I guess based on after the march, do you feel like the march accomplished what you hoped it would? Did it?
Yeah, it was great. The numbers of people, not just in D.C., but in Atlanta and Chicago. And, there were so many people. And every time they say there's a pro-Trump rally, I look and I try to guess. And I did see something last night where they panned out to mm-hmm. show that it wasn't like they were just focusing in on one little group of people. They went out and out and out and out to show there's no people out here that you're avoiding. It's mm-hmm. just... And the atmosphere for them is not the same either. People sort of trudging along, dragging flags, or having guns to protect themselves.
Well, I'll ask just a couple more questions. So I guess at this point where we are after the march and looking towards the future, what do you think might be your greatest hope for the future, and what might be your greatest fear?
The greatest hope is that they will prove the Russian ties to the point that not just Trump, mm-hmm. but Pence, certainly Bannon, who doesn't belong in there at all. I heard that there's one person, that Nunes slipped and said there's one person, and I'm thinking it might be Bannon. Mm-hmm. But getting him out of there, even just getting him out of there would be a triumph. But I'd like to see the whole thing because I don't want Ryan to be president either. If we keep going down the line, there's a long way to go before you can get anybody who's not a nitwit. But at least, even if we got stuck with Pence, who was a complete jerk, and who I think is very much involved because he did know about those things, at least he's not totally insane and carrying around the nuclear football with the codes, and then we can vote them out and get rid of them. I'd like to see normal government back, and a lot of these horrible things like it's almost like the opposite day when you're in school, wear your shirt backwards, have breakfast after lunch, dessert first at lunchtime. It's almost like backwards day. Let's vote for destroying our air, polluting that. Let's vote for putting coal ash in our water. Let's undo and start the pipeline again. Let's take away newborn care, maternity care, elder care. Let's stop. It's like the opposite. What would be the worst thing I could do? Let's take someone who hates education, or hates public education, and put her in. Let's find the worst person for every post and make everything more expensive for it's like opposite day. And I would like to see a normal government where maybe we don't agree with everything. I haven't liked every president that's been in, that's for sure, but I have never considered this kind of, I have dreams about it. My husband says, well, you're really imaginative. I have dreams where I can just like sort of be someplace, and I don't kill people. I never would kill anybody, and honestly I wouldn't. If you had Trump and no witnesses, I wouldn't kill him, but I might very well give him a stroke bad enough to take him out of office until he was too old to go back in. I would give him a medicine that, something like that, or a truth serum where he couldn't say a lie the entire day. He had to tell the truth about everything.
That would kill him right there.
Right, and that would be it, the end of him. So I just, and my worst fear is that they don't get rid of him, and that not only do they not get rid of him, but people give up.
Yeah.
Because if people give up, this is all we've got, is us,
And we keep going. Well, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel important to say, or?
I don't think so. I liked my woman card, but I'm willing to give it up. I don't really have anyone I'm going to pass it to.
I have a bunch of stuff. I went to the convention in Philadelphia too, and I have all kinds of things that I'm going to give to them, and I'm like, I kind of want to keep it, but I don't have kids or anything, and I'm like, I have pictures of them. That's I don't need a bag of stuff.
My ex-in-laws, they're actually my good friends, but they said, just think, doing this, your grandchildren are going to have this memory that, that you did this thing that was important, especially the children who are half Latino, because they are very, it's a very social family. Like every little occasion is a huge occasion, and so many people come over, and they fill the house, and they fill the backyard, and they put up a bouncy castle for the kids. And I'm sure out of those people, there are quite a few people who really feel endangered.
I lived in Miami for 10 years. I taught at FIU and Miami-Dade Wolfson, and I got my doctoral work at the University of Miami. But that, to me, that whole community, people I worked with, my uncle owns a 24-hour diner on South Beach, and I would bartend graveyard shifts while I was working my doctorate. And most of the people I worked for, he hired people under the table, but most of them were from Cuba, from South America. A lot of them were not legal, but they paid taxes. They got paycheck, they had fake Social Security cards, but they were not reaping the benefits. They couldn't go to school. They couldn't, they were doing the best they could and sending everything home to their families. And
my daughter's a teacher in middle school in a district that is considered one of the, and she's working in a program in the schools for endangered, the districts that have a lot of real problems, and it is mostly, if you're not Latino, then you're Black. It's one or the other, and it's mostly Latino. And she said that the day he was after the election, the kids were crying, they were afraid, and unfortunately, they probably were right to be crying and afraid,
But I was.
I'm not even they were afraid for themselves,
specifically,
for their
personally.
families.
But it's just,
we were all
the general. But that's terrifying for them. It's like, I have a friend whose mother, her parents have been married for 25 years, but she's only ever been married. She's from Scotland, and she was like, hey, they could send my mom back technically, legally. Not that they're going to come after her, but at the same time, just as vulnerable in some ways, just that she's not brown.
Yeah, well, you know what? If she herself made enough fuss
can
they might
very
come
easily
after
be.
her mother.
Exactly.
I know. I said, well, I've sort of given Trump too much info on me. If you feel like, I'm sure I'll be on a list somewhere at some point in my life. But I said, well, every day. And I think about, would it ever be a situation? Because I grew up with on Long Island, it was a very mixed group of people at that time. And my best friends, I was Protestant, my best friends were Catholic and Jewish. And her mother had been in a camp, I know that. I don't know where her dad was, if he was just worked out of the area or whatever. And she was very timid, extremely timid. She always worried very much. Robin had to play right where she could see her every minute. And she was, even children, she was a little afraid of even, because they after all, they had the Hitler Youth, you never know. Yeah. And she carried that with her. She had to know me for a long time before she invited me in. Yeah. Then she invited me in for a Sabbath meal. And this is really weird, and I cannot explain it to you because, like I told you, I was born Protestant. Never lived in Germany, and was never Jewish. But at the minute she put the veil over her face and started to say the prayer, I said the response in Hebrew. And she was terrified. Now, I didn't know why she was terrified because it didn't seem strange to me. I was little. Why, how did she know this? And I don't know how I knew it. Don't ask me how I knew it. But she was so scared. I mean, she was afraid to let me back in the house again. I mean, my mother said, that's darn strange, Wendy. That is pretty strange. How did you do that? She tried to talk to the mom and say, America is safe anyway, and we are safe people. I'm Quaker.
Right, exactly.
I'm Quaker. But she said, she knew the prayer. She knew what to say. And I'm like, I don't know. So to see that, I think, are we actually going to have to go to the place where we have to hide people? Where we have to take in people who are going to have to leave their families, or go back to what? What are you going? If you go from Syria, what are you going to go back to? There's nowhere to go.
It's heinous. It's
and look at the Russians. They were always coming here as gymnasts or ballerinas and looking for asylum as soon as they got here. They were real good at that.
Insane. Well, is there anything else? Do you feel like you've had
I'll shut up. So
there'll still be more. I mean, there's always more. When I was with Morna, I did my interview yesterday with her, and we were talking for almost 2 hours. So it's just so much. And she had interviewed my mom a few weeks ago. So I'm just trying. It's nice to have had that experience yesterday, to know how Morna, like, things she asked, and make sure that I get the highlights. But thank you so much. This has been really fun and interesting. Thank you for letting me do this with you. I appreciate it.